Hi, guys. Thanks so much for joining us today for our very last interview of this series. And I'm so happy to be here with my friend, Amy Bushatz. Amy, we've known each other for a very long time.
Let's not even discuss how long because that is
Right.
going to both of us.
And so we've actually really had a great time catching up because I have not had a chance to catch up with you since you moved to Alaska and founded your newsroom. So I'm really, really excited about today. But before we get too far, Amy's husband is in the National Guard. When I met Amy, your husband was active duty Army, and then you transitioned. You guys moved to Alaska, and he went on with the Alaska National Guard. So that's new. And you've now founded your own newsroom. But before we talk about that, so there might be some people out there who don't know you. So could you just give them a little bit about your background and a little bit about your military spouse professional journey?
Sure, of course. So, as you mentioned, my name's Amy Bushatz. Until 2023, I was with military.com, where I was the executive editor since 2018 or so. But I started there in 2010, after my son was born and just a couple of years after I married into the military. I had been a working journalist before I got married, left that to, the whole follow the soldier business, right? Had a kid, right, snappy, quick, because again, this is what we do. Really struggled to find work in my industry where we were stationed. Journalism at that time was going through was sort of at the tail end of a real downsizing that started in 2005. And so like I interviewed for a role at the Tacoma News Tribune near Joint Base Lewis McChord. And that role, they just decided not to fill it. Like it was open when I interviewed for it and it was closed by virtue of downsizing. And so I worked in coffee shops, which by the way, I loved. And then I had a baby, which I loved the baby, but the having of loved less, right? And I just was unemployed for a while.
Yeah.
So my family situation sort of changed with my personal, my parents and my family, and I wanted to be able to contribute some money to them. And so I was like, okay, behold, I must now have a job. And I had my eye on a fellowship, like a journalism fellowship for several years, applied for and got that,
Mhm.
which was remote. But part of that was that I needed to have journalism, like what I was working on through them, published somewhere as a part of that project. And so I sort of sniffed around and realized that one place that might publish what I needed, just sort of fulfill the obligations of that was a blog called SpouseBuzz, which us old people will be familiar with. It was, back in the blogging days, one of the top military spouse blogs, and it was sort of run by a collection of people. Well, at that same time, right around that time, a friend who I'd worked with in a previous role, so networking, right? Like just keeping your connections going, called me and basically cold called me and offered me an editor job at military.com. And
Nice.
so I was, blogging for SpouseBuzz for my project and then also working for military.com as a website editor. That was a remote role. And so we moved here, there, and everywhere around the continental US. But I was able to keep that job going and really become really an expert in the military spouse and family policy space, meet lovely people like you, Sue, and just sort of live that just really deep in the trenches of military life, where I was both involved in the military community because that's where we lived and that was my life, but also because it was my profession to be an expert and a voice for that space. So in 2016, when my husband and I decided that he needed to get out of the active duty to really, for mental health reasons more than anything else, and to keep our family going strong, we chose to move to Alaska as a place to start over. He left active duty, but I stayed in my role at military.com, now living that guard life, but the more time I spent living in a civilian community, it's a little bit like folks experience when they retire, right? There's this off ramp of the military is no longer the thing I live and breathe every moment of every day in my personal life, but it's still the thing I'm breathing in my professional life. And it wasn't so much that I was bored or disinterested, because I wasn't. I was really interested in, and after that many years, you're just this expert in the military
Right.
community, but I started to see the need in my physical community too, in a way that, of course, I hadn't experienced before, because my physical community was the military community, right? And the more I encountered that need in my small town, the more I thought, you know what, I can hand off this work in the military community to someone else. There are other experts. We're talking about, a cool million people who are affiliated with the military as service members themselves and veterans, right? Plus their family members. Okay. Surely someone else in the land can pick up this mantle, and like, I'm not the be all end all of this. But here in my community where I live right now, where there are 117,000 people spread across an area the size of West Virginia,
No.
it's statistically less likely that somebody is equipped as I am to solve a critical news need here. And so I decided to move away from being in the military journalism space to being in the local journalism space, to serve my community.
No, that's so cool because we were talking about earlier about how, because I was talking about the national news because, living around DC, you just can't help it. You're always talking about the national news. And then, you were talking about how you're looking at hyper local news. And the only time you're ever going to, follow or, talk about or write about the national news is if it impacts your local community, which I think is so cool. Um, is that how you started the newsroom? I think is so cool. Like, how did you think to do it? Was it because you recognized the gap in the market that no one was really talking about the hyper local news, or was it a passion project, something you'd always wanted to do?
Yeah, it's really a combination of all of those things. I always approached military news as my local news, right? It's geographically dispersed local news, but it was about my community, right? It's about military spouse and family issues. It was about veteran family issues. It was
Right.
veterans, military members, right? So, and I really, when I was in charge of military.com, but my passion was always like spouse and family benefits, spouse and family policies. Okay. Um, so I love local news. Well, then I live in somewhere where I'm like geographically local, right? Like here we all are. Okay. And I started to notice that there was a gap and there was issues that were not being covered, or maybe topics would be a better word to use, right? I'm talking about like, why are my kids why is school delayed an hour every Monday? Didn't know that was happening until it started happening, right?
Mhm.
Why is there a different bus service now for its schools that, by the way, did not have their lives together, right? Didn't even know they were going to change the contract. Okay. Like, and how, if I'm like typically aware of what's around me, but I don't know about these things. Okay. How is anybody else who is also typically aware, but doesn't know about things, having a chance to participate? Like, in conclusion, where are the journalists?
Right.
Okay. And so I, as military spouses are wont to do, instead of complaining about something, I looked in the mirror and thought, maybe you could be the solution for this. And so, yeah, so it's really a blending of all of those things, right? A need, a passion project, and just something that I love. And I love covering local news, and I love being like knowing people and being able to answer questions and connecting the dots for folks the same way I got to do in the military community, where I would get an email from the TRICARE policy manual update email. Okay.
Right.
I have this listserv and they're like, policy, blah, 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 has been changed change 1000 has been logged. And you're like, ooh, what is that? And you go in there and it's in like bureaucracy ease. Okay. And then my job as that journalist is to say, this is how this is what this change means to like a human. Okay. So now I get to do that in my local community for things that are usually quite as complicated as TRICARE, but still matter a lot.
No, they're lucky to have you. I think that's so cool. But knowing that, like, how do you even go about starting a newsroom? Like, you're a very good researcher, but what does that research process even look like?
It was hard. Part of it is starting a business, right? Like any business, like licenses and registrations, and got to have a logo, and should research the market, and like all of these just sort of best practices. But there are a lot of national organizations that support this kind of an effort. And so it's really like a practice of getting it plugged into those and then using the like education resources that they have available. It took me months to figure that out, by the way. And then the other thing I did was I started working for the Anchorage Daily News, which is, of course, based in Anchorage. They're about an hour away from us, but they do some news coverage here in my area, or they used to. And so they hired me to work part-time for them, knowing that I was starting this other thing. And with this idea that once I started said thing, they would, I would no longer work for them, but they would purchase my work as a part of that.
Cool.
And so that is what we're doing today. But doing that helped me sort of get that other part of the education, which was like learning about local issues in a way that I could then communicate back to people who are reading it, get to know local officials the same way I did, when I started covering the Pentagon or I started covering the Defense Commissary Agency, right? Like, you got to get to know the people who are running it. You got to gain some trust. You need a rapport. You need to know the correct questions to ask, and you need to have some idea of what the answer should be. Like I don't know obviously I don't know the answers to questions before I ask, but I know when the answer is
not right.
That's leading.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And then you cut the cord. I think we talked about that. You cut the cord and you turned on the lights, and I think that's so cool. But now you have to run a business. Like, not only do you have not only do you have to like do your passion side, which is, reporting the news for your community and everything, but then you have the other daunting side, which is now you have to run a business. Like, you have to scale, you have to be viable. I mean, so where do you see your newsroom in like 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, I was kind of looking around because I was like, look at this award I just won. Well, I just won this award for New Business of the Year, and it's something
Very cool.
From National Publisher Association, with like something over 500 different publishers, and of course we were a finalist, and then the awardee. And that award recognizes a sustainable business setup. Okay, so like the hat trick will be turning it into the current Business of the Year award, like in 4 years, right? Like, look,
yeah,
business, and now they still exist. Yay, right? That's the goal. Okay. So, yeah. So, the balance there is just, it's, keeping it's like any other business, right? You keep the product. So my product is news primarily, right? So I keep the product going and then do what you need to do to keep the business moving forward. So in a nonprofit space, that looks like, a lot of like keeping grants and donations moving in a sustainable and consistent way. Communicating things back to those donors. You and I are talking on a Friday. I in my head have a thing called Finance Friday where I do all of that work on Fridays, but usually it becomes like Finance Sunday afternoon or evening.
Okay. I have a yuck bucket Monday. I do all my admin stuff on Mondays.
There you go. So so it doesn't always happen when I think it should, but it does. I do have to, I have to get it done, right? Or I cannot exist. And so it's just sort of keeping good habits, just like you would in any business where you're like, okay, like I got to do my QuickBooks, or like I don't get to be in existence anymore.
Yeah.
Send invoices or I'm not going to get paid. And so it's a lot of just keeping those good habits. We've been in existence for just over a year and a half. I still use the word we, even though you're looking at her. Someday that will be like the word that
you and the mouse in your pocket.
Right, me and the mouse. And I do that, sometimes I jokingly do that. They like, let me go get my admin secretary.
It's me.
Hello.
Not.
Or like, you're like, it is I. Like, sometimes I do that, right? Like, but obviously jokingly, but eventually I will have other people working with me, right? And I can offload some of this stuff. I'm hoping to have an investment grant come in. It's a competitive process, obviously, but from the organization through whom we received this New Business of the Year award to help us scale a little bit, to hire somebody to take care of the business thing so that I can make more money, so that I can, so that I can hire this person without a grant, and so on and so forth, right? And it's just those like those scaling questions of any business, but with the benefit of hopefully having some grant support for that too.
No, I think that's amazing because I mean, earlier when we were talking about your passion for the news and for local news, and then now we're talking, and you're talking very convincingly like a businesswoman. So I
Well,
think it's
faking
very
it till I make it,
convincingly,
baby. Faking it till I make it.
but I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm like making it up on the daily. Tell you what. So,
Well, we would not know. We would not know. But like, is this, I was telling you that I always ask the last question and, based on like what you answer on the other stuff. And I think the only thing I want to know is actually there are a lot of things I want to know if Alaska life is what you expect it to be. But is this also what you thought you would be doing when you graduated from school or, like when you were working at military? Did you think you were going to be running your own business? Because I will say that one thing that people who are not entrepreneurs don't understand is that you spend less time doing the work you want to do and more time running the business. So, I mean, is this what you thought you'd be doing? And I mean, is there anything you would change about your life right now?
oh gosh, no, I love this. This is my favorite thing I've done. There were times like I loved covering military news. I loved covering TRICARE, and there's this like little adrenaline rush when you uncover something exciting and get to tell other people about it. It's so fun, right? But I love local news, and the most fun I ever had before this in a job was covering local news right out of college in Washington, D.C. I covered local DC news, like inside the city, like the city council there. And wow, was that so much fun. And this is the same kind of thing. So I'm having fun and I really like it. I'm not sure what I think if you had asked young Amy, like when I was 20 or so, I was living in DC, and the trajectory for a reporter in DC is like you cover local news, then you cover the Hill and the Big Daddy. Like everybody wants to cover the White House, right? And so I felt like that. I thought that would be my trajectory, but not necessarily because that's what I wanted so much as that's what you did.
That was the path. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that if I didn't have the hubris of that, I would have been more than happy to get to cover local news forever, and which is really what I get to do now. I think like a lot of business owners, as you indicated, you don't necessarily love the business part, right? Like you want to do the thing that you were doing, and the business part facilitates that. I do love having the vision though of like the whole thing. When I was at military.com as the executive editor, I thought that was so much fun because I could move those pieces around to make the whole, like to think about it as a product, not just as like individual journalism, so like that big picture, like, are we serving the audience? Is there anything else they need? Like what keeps them coming back as a part of this business? With military.com, like obviously stories about TRICARE and like this super useful stuff, okay, is really important. But what keeps folks coming back? Well, I'll tell you right now, top story at military.com is what to eat for free on Veterans Day. Okay.
The Whitman quotient. What's in it for me?
Right. But it's like, people want that, like they want to know about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You spend way less time on that than like aggregate and brain power than you do on some like super technical thing that 4 people read. And you're like, what? Like,
well, they keep it as reference so they know where to go because they
right.
develop that trust with you.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
So,
I mean, I love like sort of that, having that big picture perspective. And I really do enjoy being in charge of stuff. I don't know how else to say that. As opposed to being like an underling. I think it's really
like being the decision maker.
I like being a decision maker. I think that as I grow this, the Mat-Su Sentinel is what my newspaper is. As I grow that, it's online only. So a newspaper is a little bit of a misnomer because there's no like actual paper. But as I grow that, I would love to be able to be on a team of decision makers. Like we were like collaboratively doing those things together. As opposed to me having those like meetings where I'm like, let me ask everybody, like it's just in my head. I don't love working in a vacuum, but yeah, that's a long answer to your question of like, do you love what you're doing? And the answer is yes, I love it.
No, I think it's a great answer. And I mean, we could go on forever, but I know you have a hard stop because you were also solo parenting because you were still a military spouse. And your spouse is, not there right now. So,
Not here right now. Although it's funny because like other military spouses will appreciate this. He is stateside doing training, right? He is not deployed. But in a civilian community, people are like, "Oh, where's your husband?" Oh, I say he's gone with the National Guard. Like I'm very careful not to say he's deployed because that is not the same. Okay, which you and I know, right? Okay, so they're like, "Ooh, is he in Kuwait?" I'm like, not quite.
it's not the only place they go.
Like he's like in the U.S. Like,
That's funny.
yeah, it's pretty funny. Like, I'm like, or Poland, not really. Like,
He's in the US. He's in the lower 48.
yeah, I'm trying to communicate. Like, I really could use some help, like fixing the toilet, right? Like, balance that with like the reality of like we are in like a war zone. So don't feel like sorry.
I mean, I understand he's not deployed, but gone is still gone. I mean, especially to the
Yeah,
kid.
well, totally. But like, like I think the one thing in the military community, like we want to be very fair to each other, right? Like not
Absolutely.
the extra stress of danger, which my spouse is not in at this time that I am aware of. So
And if he is, you don't want to know.
because I don't want to know.
Been great catching up. There's so many other questions I could ask you. Maybe we'll have to do it after we say goodbye to everybody. But I just want to thank you, Amy, for coming. And I'll give you the last word. Are there any last words you would tell to somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps, whether it's, a fledgling journalist or, like who's ready to give up because they can't find opportunities? Because I know that you said that it was tough for you at the beginning.
Yeah. So for, in terms of journalism, I would like find a way to just keep writing. It's not going to always be with the publication you want it to be, but the hustle is real. It's real for everybody, bud. So, I have a military spouse here locally who had been freelancing for another local newspaper where I live, but commuting from base to do it. And I was like, I encouraged her to try to get a job at a local TV station down there. Just like it's going to be a hustle, but if you can make it work, you'll be happier because you'll be nearby and that'll help diversify your resume, so on and so forth. And that is what she's doing now. I'm really proud of her for making that happen and balancing her family. I think the other thing I'll leave with is like, JC Eckhart, who folks may know, gave me some advice, kind of opined a while back that, at some point it's time to stop making the military the center of your employment and your life. And that's true for some people in times, then it's true for other people in other times, right? There's no like universal law of this, but like military life ends. Like you retire or something, it's no longer like the center of your universe. Right. And it's okay for it not to be the center of your career fields as well, and the center of your identity, if that is where you are in your off ramp. And that can feel like a loss, but there's a whole civilian lifestyle out there, guys, and you can make it a part of what you're doing, and it's okay to take that gentle off ramp. So how that looked for me was like, I, as a part of my journalism, followed like 11 billion Facebook groups on, you name the subject on military, I was in the group. Like military spouses of Vicenza. Have I lived in Vicenza? I have. Okay. Naples, Guam, military pet moving group. Okay, like you name the issue, I was in the group. All right. And so these are still like in my Facebook feed all the time. And I'm still like, just like popcorn a little bit like, ooh, what's new? It's okay to let some of those go. Right. And just like unfollow over time. Okay. So I didn't like go out and unfollow them all. And I am still in some of these groups, like the PCS, some of these PCSing groups where it's just such a disaster all the time. Right. Because of the moving contract. I still follow some of that stuff, right? Megan Harless's group is one of those. So your pages, I still follow those, right? But like I just like, okay, I'm no longer in the Naples group.
Right.
Okay, right. So it's okay to like just sort of filter these off of your world a little bit at a time. Just because you're saying goodbye to military life does not mean that you have to like cut the cord right now. You can just sort of off ramp, and it's gonna feel better.
I love that. And that's very wise. And those are great words to end on, especially from our very last highlight for this series. So thank you, Amy. And thank you to our friends at USAA for making these conversations possible. And we hope you've enjoyed these conversations and we hope you go back and read the other highlights. I just told Amy to check out Dana Dunn because they are neighbors.
Yeah,
As you never know.
that reindeer farm that she works at is 13 miles away. And the way I know that is because I run by there.
There you go. And so you never know who you will meet in these highlights. You never know how you'll be inspired. So thank you so much, Amy, for being our last. And thank you to our friends at USA. We will see you next time somewhere. Bye, guys.